It staggers, over a ton of muscle and bone, and it can barely stand. Its jaw is so swollen it hasn't eaten in weeks. The most powerful predator this planet has ever produced is dying from an infected tooth. We always picture dinosaurs the same way: unstoppable, perfectly engineered, machines of muscle and instinct. But that's a story we made up, because the fossils tell a different one. When scientists look deep inside the bones, and they find tumors, infections, broken vertebrae that healed crooked, joints destroyed by arthritis. Dinosaurs suffered the same way we do. But here's where it gets unsettling. How did they survive it? Did they feel pain the way we do? Could they heal themselves? And were there plagues, diseases that swept through entire herds, wiping them out long before the first asteroid ever appeared? The answers are stranger than you'd expect, and they change everything we thought we knew about the age of dinosaurs. Let's start with what we can actually prove. Paleontologists have been studying fossils for over 200 years, but only in recent decades have they started scanning bones, specifically for signs of disease. What they found shocked them. A hadrosaur from the late Cretaceous, a plant eater the size of a school bus, had over 40 bone tumors covering its body. 40. It's called skeletal dysplasia. In humans, it's a rare and agonizing condition. Every step this animal took must have been pain, and yet it survived. For how long, we don't know, but its bones tell a story of endurance that's almost hard to sit with. And it wasn't alone. Scientists have found healed fractures in Allosaurus spines, suggesting these massive predators took brutal injuries and kept going. They've found evidence of gout in a Tyrannosaurus rex, a condition caused by a buildup of uric acid in the joints. Gout, by the way, is notoriously one of the most painful conditions known to medicine. A T-Rex with gout. Let that image settle for a moment. Now here's the question that nobody thinks to ask. If dinosaurs got this sick, how on earth did any of them ever recover? Because there were no doctors, no medicine, no shelter except what the landscape provided. So what happened when a dinosaur's body broke down? The answer involves something buried in the bones themselves, and it's more sophisticated than anyone expected. Here's something that will reframe everything. Bone heals, not just in humans, in every vertebrate animal on the planet. When a bone breaks, the body immediately begins rebuilding. It forms what's called a callus, a bridge of new bone tissue that knits the break back together. And paleontologists can see this in dinosaur fossils. A Triceratops specimen found in Montana had a fractured horn that had fully rehealed. The animal survived the injury, lived long enough to grow new bone around the break. An Edmontosaurus, another large plant eater, had healed bite marks on its tail. A predator had attacked it, left puncture wounds in the bone, and the Edmontosaurus escaped, and healed, and walked away. The bones are full of these stories of animals that were hurt badly enough to leave permanent marks, but survived anyway, which tells us something important. Dinosaurs weren't fragile. Their immune systems, their healing capacity, was likely comparable to modern large reptiles and birds, both of which are extraordinarily resilient. A Komodo dragon can survive wounds that would kill a human. Modern birds recover from injuries that seem catastrophic. Dinosaurs were built the same way. But there's one category of illness that no amount of toughness can fight. And this is the part that starts to feel like a horror story. What about disease that spreads? Not a broken bone, not a tumor. A pathogen, something invisible, something that moves from animal to animal, through the air, through water, through contact. Did dinosaurs experience epidemics? The honest answer is, we don't know for certain, but the evidence suggests they almost certainly did. And what that might have looked like is deeply unsettling. Here's the problem with finding evidence of infection in fossils. Soft tissue doesn't fossilize. The lungs, the liver, the blood, all of it rots away within years of death. What we're left with is bone, and most pathogens don't leave marks on bone. They kill the animal before it ever gets that far, but some do. Scientists discovered a bone infection called osteomyelitis in multiple dinosaur specimens. Osteomyelitis is caused by bacteria. It attacks the bone directly. It's slow, it's painful, and in the modern world, without antibiotics, it's often fatal. One T-Rex specimen, not the famous Sue, a different individual, showed signs of a severe respiratory infection. Lesions in the neck vertebrae consistent with a condition similar to trichomoniasis. This is the same disease that decimated British songbird populations in the 2000s. It's caused by a parasite. It causes lesions in the throat and jaw. It makes swallowing impossible. The animal starves to death. And the T-Rex that showed these signs, it was one of the largest, most powerful predators to ever walk the earth, brought down not by another predator, not by drought or starvation, but by something it couldn't see, something microscopic. Now, if individual animals were being killed by parasites and bacteria, what happened when those things spread? This is the part that changes how you think about extinction. But before we get there, if you've made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if this is making you see dinosaurs differently, drop a like. It genuinely helps more people find this. Now, back to the question. We know from the fossil record that dinosaur populations crashed long before the asteroid. Some scientists have called it a slow decline. Others argue certain lineages were already struggling. But here's what almost never gets discussed. Disease. In 2004, researchers studying the Hell Creek Formation in Montana, one of the richest Cretaceous fossil sites on Earth, found evidence that large dinosaur populations were under severe biological stress in the final million years before the impact. Bone pathology rates were high, signs of chronic infection, signs of nutritional deficiency. Now, a million years is an enormous stretch of time, and we can't say definitively that disease was the cause. But think about what we know about animal populations today. When large animals are stressed, when habitats shrink, when food becomes scarce, their immune systems weaken, and that's when pathogens move in. Entire herds of saiga antelope, over 200,000 animals, were wiped out in Kazakhstan in 2015 by a bacterial infection that normally lives harmlessly in their bodies. It turned lethal because temperatures spiked, the bacteria exploded, and the entire population collapsed in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Now imagine that dynamic playing out across tens of millions of years among animals that lived in enormous herds, traveled vast distances, and shared waterholes with hundreds of other species. Disease wasn't just a background risk for dinosaurs. It was one of the defining forces of their world, a world where a single infected hadrosaur could contaminate a waterhole, where parasites could move through a herd like fire through dry grass, where a T-Rex at the peak of its power could be brought to its knees by something it couldn't bite, couldn't outrun, and couldn't fight. There's a reason this story matters. For a long time, we imagined dinosaurs as monsters, perfect predators, invincible giants. The fossils don't show that. The fossils show animals that broke, that healed, that suffered, that died from infections and tumors and parasites, just like every other living thing on this planet. They were not invincible, they were alive. And there's something almost intimate about that. A triceratops that regrew bone around a broken horn, an Edmontosaurus that survived a predator attack and walked away, a T-Rex grinding through existence with gout. These weren't monsters, they were animals doing exactly what every living thing does, trying to survive whatever the world threw at them. Here's what the bones are really telling us. Toughness isn't immunity. The biggest, most powerful creatures that ever lived were still brought low by the smallest things imaginable. And 66 million years later, so are we.